As I say, every time you report on the story, you have to think about the potential ethics involved in the case. An ethical dilemma that I can think of, though, that we frequently encounter as undercover or investigative reporters or just plain reporters, is that anytime you're doing a story, you have to balance out your constituencies, right? My responsibility as a reporter primarily is to inform the audience, the public, about the things that I'm finding as a reporter. If I'm finding things as a reporter that might do damage to the reputation of somebody because they're involved in fraud, for example, or other criminal activity, then clearly that's going to have an effect on the person that I'm doing the story on, and their family sometimes too. And that's going to be known publicly as well. So, those are kind of conflicting things you have to decide. Basically, the whole concept is to try and minimize the amount of harm that you're doing when you're reporting on a story. But sometimes you realize that you're going to have to name names if illegal activity is involved, which could damage the reputation of the people that you're reporting on or asking questions about. And they could also wind up doing jail time too. I think a lot of it just has to do with the dynamics of the costs of doing long-term investigative reports. Although you still see it being done by reporting outfits that have the resources to do that. Nellie Bly worked for a very wealthy publication, newspaper, and magazine when she was a muckraker as a reporter. They had the resources. There are newspapers, for example, the Washington Post, the New York Times, that still do some outstanding investigative reporting, and they have the resources to be able to follow sources like that. Public television has done some outstanding investigative reporting, as have some of the major networks. But it is a time-consuming process. When I was working as an investigative reporter in Columbus, Ohio, before I came here, at any given time, we probably had 12 different investigations unfolding, and sometimes we could spend months on those investigations before we could get to the place where we felt like, okay, now we're ready to go public with this story. But we had to nail down the facts. We had to have independent confirmation of other allegations that we were reporting on before we could go public with them. They had to be vetted by attorneys. It was a very rigorous process you have to go through. And quite frankly, a lot of the smaller news outlets just don't have the resources to be able to allow their reporters that much time to do investigative reporting. Let's say I'm doing a story on Ford Motor Company or some major automobile manufacturer. And as an investigative reporter, I uncover potential safety problems with a vehicle, which is what I did when I was in Detroit, or actually when I was in Columbus. That automobile manufacturer might pull in millions of dollars in advertising as a threat. They might say, well, if you report that story, we're going to pull all our advertising from your television station, which, television stations don't operate for free. So there is sometimes those judgments that have to be made. There were investigative stories that I reported on, and we did report on them. But once we got to a place where I wanted to go deeper with the reporting, the attorneys at the television station I worked at said, you know what, we just don't want to take on the cost of defending a lawsuit that we fully expect to win, but we're also going to have to spend a couple of $100,000 defending this lawsuit. So we just don't think it's justified for you to go farther with your reporting than you already have here. You've made your point, so we're going to move on. So, checks and balances are in place.